And welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Live. As you saw, we have new intro videos. I was working on that all week. Yeah. So, So anyway,
cool.
so we have a lot going on today, actually. We have some team news. We have an interesting topic that some of you may or may not know about. Today we got the whole panel on here. We got me, Tim, and Nick. We are going to talk about something very interesting today. It's going to be a topic that was widely discussed in the early 2000s. So I wouldn't say we're late to the game, but I guess we kind of are late to the game. But
well, it's kind of a nostalgic piece, I guess you could say.
We've talked about it before.
Yeah, it's something that is an urban legend that is known by a lot of people, and it's just something kind of cool to go back to here and there.
Yeah.
So
it's part of our team legacy too.
Yeah. So something I'll do team news first. We usually go over it last. I'll go over it first. So I am in the middle of uploading all of our original, original podcasts from our old show from about 10 years ago. And at the moment, I've uploaded about 30 of our old episodes. So I don't have them all on here. But once it's complete, it should take me roughly about a month or so, I'm guessing, maybe a month and a half. But we'll have the whole entire library of our old shows, plus these new ones. There are some interviews that we did with some individuals who are now deceased. And some of that stuff is very interesting, and it's nowhere else on the internet. Like, we talked to tons of UFO crash guys that aren't around anymore. We talked to some Bigfoot guys that aren't around anymore. Not to mention, there's some people that just don't even do interviews anymore. We have Frank Fascino Jr., for instance. He just doesn't even do interviews at all anymore, apparently, or Jeff Wamsley from the Mothman. So we got a lot going on. So without further ado, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We'll talk a little bit about some paranormal news around the world. Tim, do you have any stories, or just me and Nick?
I don't have one yet. I just barely got home a few minutes ago.
Oh, all right, no problem. Me and Nick have a few. You want to go first, Nick?
Yeah, sure.
And Nick's sharing his screen.
Well, here's an interesting article I found. Ghost hunters turn to robots to help them track down spooks.
Not us.
I don't know. This looks kind of interesting. From the use of reel-to-reel tape recorders to the latest technological gadgets, ghost hunters are always on the lookout for new ways to detect the presence of spirits. One such tool that is currently gaining popularity among paranormal investigators is an 18-centimeter tall toy robot. Released by Huawei in 2014, it's called MIP, which stands for Mobile Inverted Pendulum. Because it balances like a Segway on two big wheels, the friendly little robot responds to the movements of your hand. It's this gesture recognition technology that has caught the attention of paranormal investigators who believe that the invisible movement of ghosts can be detected by the robot's sensors. The awareness of MIP's alternative use in ghost hunting was recently raised by the paranormal reality TV show Help Me, My House is Haunted. So I guess they put that in a suspected haunted area. This little
that is weird. That is bizarre.
That is very weird. I couldn't even imagine dragging that thing out to like Rhyolite or something. In the middle of in the middle of nowhere, Nick.
Yeah.
Having to hike with that shit on your back too, climbing up the hill.
I think we need to get one. It's kind of cute. Okay.
Hey Tim, I wrote in the private chat for you, me, and Nick if you want to check that out.
Pentagon's UFO tracking efforts still find no alien origins. The Pentagon is investigating a rising number of cases involving unidentified aircraft. The head of the agency's effort told senators on Wednesday it is now tracking some 650 incidents. 2 new videos were released at the rare open congressional hearing on unexplained anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, the lame word, I call them UFOs still, as the Pentagon calls them, to highlight how the recently established all-domain anomaly resolution office can explain some incidents, but not others.
Mhm.
And down here is a pretty interesting video of some device they caught flying in the air in Iraq.
Oh, is that the Baghdad Phantom? Is that the one?
Declassified research.
Oh, interesting.
This first one is an MQ-9 in the Middle East, observing that blow up, which is an apparent spherical object via EO sensors. Those are not IR. You want to go ahead and click that and play it. Each one of those little blobs is actually a representation of the object as it's moving through. And later in the video, as the camera slews, that trail actually follows the direction of the camera. These apart frame by frame, we were able to demonstrate that is essentially a readout overlap of the image. It's a shadow image, right? It's not real. You'll see it pop in and out of the field of view there. This is essentially all of the data we have
this little orb
with this event from some years ago. It is going to be virtually impossible to.
But there's been a big rise in UFO sightings being released by the government, and they're looking into it. And surely they'll give us an honest answer. Like,
oh yeah, like said, all this other horrible shit going on. Of course, they got to distract us with throw out the UFOs now.
Yeah.
Well, Congress was meeting. Was like a day or two ago. Congress was meeting about that. I know everyone says that it was completely worthless, waste of time, that they didn't get anything, nothing interesting was said, but I guess they're supposed to mean. Well, they were saying too.
So they're going to keep possibly dragons as long as they can.
Oh yeah.
Well, actually, it's Marco Rubio is the one that started a lot of this, like the disclosure of UFOs, which we're going to do our own show on that. I figured we'd have a good one on that. Every one of these podcasts has one, so I figured we got to do our own here.
Yeah, of course.
But no, I guess sometime over like the last year, maybe 6 months ago, Lou Elizondo was saying that there was supposed to be a bunch of individuals that were going to go forward to Congress, and they were going to have whistleblowers talking about UFO crashes and UFO disclosure. I guess apparently they're doing that. But most of those are held classified hearings, so the public doesn't even know about it. Whether they're bullshit or not, we don't know. We don't know.
Exactly.
Something that's interesting, though, there are groups that are lobbying to get Bob Lazar to go forward and speak to Congress. They said if Bob Lazar has the balls under oath to get up there and speak to Congress about what he saw and saying he's telling the truth under penalty of being thrown in jail, that he's telling the truth. But if Bob Lazar doesn't take them up on their offer and doesn't do it, then it's obvious that something's not right, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good old Lazar there. I don't know. I'm so on the fence about him.
Yeah,
that's another show.
Yeah, that'd be a show in itself, too. So, well, I have two different news stories that I want to share. The first one, I got to share my screen here. The first one... This is from Colombia. Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah.
So apparently, I got this from Coast to Coast AM of all places. The can't think of the words, not lyrics. The audio is in Spanish. So unless you speak Spanish, I have no idea what they're saying. But this is supposed to be someone at work and there's poltergeist activity.
Tremendo susto se llevó un estudiante en Colombia cuando presuntamente un ser de ultra. El muchacho estaba en una oficina cuando algo tiró su taza de café. Desconcertado, el joven se paró para traer un trapeador y recoger los trozos de la taza cuando nuevamente, vean nada más, alguien le movió la silla.
Wow.
Una mano el estudiante agarró su celular.
Like it's toying with him.
Yeah, put it on mute for a second because I don't know what she's saying and I can't hear it. So it's like it throws the coffee cup and then it moves one of the chairs.
Yeah, that's what it was, moving objects in the room.
Yeah, so that's more like a ghost sighting, I guess you would call it. Then my other one, this one I have saved in a Word document. I just got to read this to you guys. For the second year in a row, a county in Washington state has declared itself a refuge for Sasquatch. after being lobbied by a class of 5th graders. The brainchild of teacher Andrea Andrews of the Lincoln Elementary School in the city of Holoquam, the unique civics lesson saw her students research the famed cryptid and then pen a letter to a government body in which they argue that the creature needs to be recognized and protected. In 2022, her class convinced the Grays Harbor County Board of Commissioners to unanimously pass a resolution where the county was decreed to be just such a Sasquatch refuge area. Based on the success, Andrews brought the lesson back this year in the hopes of extending their efforts. Without reading every little word, I guess now they're trying to make this a more widely accepted idea. And it says,
Well, it should be.
He says, if the proclamation goes that if Bigfoot does exist, that it's an endangered species, a very endangered species, and by virtue, this creature should be protected. So right now it's just one specific county that's protecting it, I guess, in Washington. There might be more, I don't know. But I think personally, I agree with her. If it is an endangered species,
yeah, it needs to be protected.
It does need to be protected.
Yeah.
Hey, Iron Wolf. Iron Wolf's on here. Yeah, I don't know what Nick's doing. So again, real quick before we get started, we are in the middle of digitizing all of our old radio shows. Some people might want to go check those out. So those will be done here, I'd say, about in the next month. I already got 30 of them done out of about 100. So that's pretty cool. I guess without further ado, Nick says he's here putting stuff in the dryer. So we'll get started with tonight's topic. So this topic is something that's kind of controversial. It was very popular in the early 2000s, and it kind of piggybacks off of a different radio show back from a long time ago. Yeah, the Iron Wolf says it's probably a good idea not to publicize Bigfoot. He says keep them from being targeted as trophies.
That's true, though. Yeah, good point.
Yeah,
I know, because it's one of those things. It's like you need a body to prove it's real, but then at the same time, a lot of evidence supports it is real, as we've talked about countless times.
Yeah, well, you figure there's plenty of people that claim they've shot it and it either got away or maybe they missed. There was the Minnesota Iceman, where they said that someone had shot one over in the Himalayas somewhere, Tibet, I think it was, and they had it on ice and were traveling around the country like it was a circus sideshow. I believe that was the 50s, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware of that. But I was
I remember.
There's Nick. So, so we started. I was waiting for Nick. Yeah, so without further ado, we're going to get started with tonight's topic. So I guess the best way to do this is we're going to go in chronological order. So the story goes, the basic story, before we get into deep discussion here, was there's a radio show, for those of you who don't know, called Coast to Coast AM. This show first came out in the mid to late 90s, and they would have different guests on. And specifically, they were doing a show on disclosure of UFOs, of all things. And there's a guy named Mel Waters that called into this show. Mel had an interesting story. He wasn't even supposed to be the guest on that show, but he became the guest on this show. He says that he lived about 10 miles west of Ellensburg, Washington. And he said that there was a bottomless pit in his backyard. He says that this hole was there as long as anyone could remember. He said this hole was about 9 feet across. And the previous owner that lived on the property was there for about 30 or 40 years before Mel moved in. And he says that the hole was there when he moved in. And Mel and his neighbors have been throwing trash down this hole. I guess he said they've been doing this for years and years. They've never heard any kind of echo. They've never heard or smelled the trash. They don't know how deep this hole goes. They have a general idea, allegedly, of how deep this hole goes, and we'll get into that in a minute. But Nick, so before we get started into all of this, what is there anything you'd like to add to the general story before we start getting into the specifics of what Mel said and all that kind of stuff? Just the basic story?
Yeah, well, no, you basically hit on all the elements of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And this Mel Waters guy called in, said there was a big trash hole that him and his neighbors had been using, and he found it strange that none of the trash started to pile up, that people just kept throwing things in the hole and just kind of disappeared. So it's an interesting story for sure.
So Mel, he had 2 different shows where he was the actual guest, where he talked about his experiences with the hole. Then, I'm sorry, getting over a cough here. Then, I guess there was a number of shows where Mel had just called in to just give quick updates. So, supposedly Mel was saying that every day or every once a week, however long, he adds weighted fishing line down this hole. And at the time, in the early 2000s and 2002, he was at 80,000 feet, which is 15 miles of weighted line down this hole. He says that this still never touched the bottom of the hole. And at one point, he even wound, when it was at 4,500 feet, I guess they said he wound all the line back up. He put a thing of lifesavers on the end, and then he let the I keep calling it cord. He let this fishing line down, trying to see if the lifesavers were dissolved when they came back up to see if it hit water. But I guess apparently it didn't hit water. The world's deepest hole that's ever been dug was dug by the Russians, and that's 40,000 feet. So this is double that.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane.
Mariana's Trench, for those of you who are curious, is only 36,000 feet. So it's almost it's double that.
A little deep.
He says the line it didn't hit anything, so the line's still moving freely, he says. And he claims it hasn't hit anything. So this hole, even if this hole does exist, which we'll get into that later, whether we think it does or doesn't, that's a whole side conversation. If this hole does exist, this is literally the deepest hole that's on record as far as I know.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything deeper if this indeed is a hole.
Iron Wolf says he can't believe they throw trash down there. I can't imagine that turning out well. Me neither.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Well, specifically, Mel Waters was telling Art Bell at one point that he had thrown TV picture tubes down there. And Art was getting concerned because environmentalists were starting to call into the show saying that he could go to jail for that, for throwing
hazardous waste.
Hazardous materials down that hole.
Even though it's his own hole in his backyard, I'd go figure. Probably on his land too, probably.
This hole, whatever it is, they see ghost apparitions outside of it. They see UFO activity, weird creatures. They see some people have reported strange noises. The hole in general is just kind of bizarre if it does exist.
Yeah,
it's a really fantastical.
So I'll keep going on this. So Mel didn't hit water when he got to the bottom of this because I guess he was worried that maybe he was feeding line down. It was just kind of plopping in a big pile and water in the bottom. Apparently, if you yell into this hole, you don't hear anything. You don't hear an echo. Something I would like to put up there, Nick, Iron Wolf, we'll get into that in just a moment. He wanted to know if there's anything documented. We'll get into that in just a moment. Sorry, Tim said something in the chat, Nick. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, may want to.
Yeah, so Mel was saying something about that they had seen, he thought that they had hit water at the bottom of this hole, and I guess they didn't. Something else that's kind of strange, someone was asking, what are the odds that this hole leads to the center of the earth? Like, it sounds crazy to talk about, and I gotta admit, I sound insane mentioning that. But people that believe in the hollow earth theory, could this be a hole that leads into the center of the earth? I want to see what your take is on this, Nick.
I mean, to stretch the possibilities would be an understatement, but I guess we could stretch the possibility and say that all could go down to the center of the earth. Sure.
There's a two-parter to it, Nick. Sorry to cut you off. There's a second part to the question. I don't know if you answered the first part already. So part 2. So I'm uploading some of our old radio shows, and we had a guest on our show named Bill Tracer. Bill had talked about the hollow earth theory, and whether I believe in this or not is really the question. But I guess there's a group of people that believe that in the center of the earth, there's something called the reptoids. Basically, it's like some kind of strange creatures that live in the center of the earth. I don't.
Or they're supposed to
really
predate humanity.
Yeah, I don't personally believe in that, but I know some people out there do believe in this. And Bill mentioned when he was on our show a couple years ago, he said that he believes that there's certain points within the U.S., and Washington State was one of the ones that he mentioned, saying that there was holes that led to the center of the earth, and he believed that these creatures were going to come out of these holes someday. He was really afraid of it. I don't know, Nick. You want to talk a little bit about that and what your opinion is?
Yeah, well, we had Bill on nearly a decade ago on our old radio show, and he was very insightful and knowledgeable about this topic that Jeremy brought up. And he was saying that there was an imminent invasion of Earth, imminent meaning like 10, 20 years in the future from that point. And he said the reptoids were going to come from like Antarctica, Australia, parts of North America, and he suggested that Mel's Hole was a possible gateway for these reptoids to emerge from the earth to come wipe out humanity. Again, it's an interesting take.
Creative, I guess.
Right, yeah, very creative.
In the words of Stanton Friedman, it's a creative take, I guess. So Iron Wolf was asking if there's any documentation on video. Yes and no. So we'll get into that in a little bit later. I promise you we'll get back to this. Very interesting. So Iron Wolf says, start tossing more trash down the hole. Figure out how deep it is. So something interesting, and I forgot to mention, this is for Iron Wolf. I guess Mel claims that the locals have wells. They have water wells that they use to draw up water for their homes. And supposedly, Mel was saying, even though they throw all this garbage down these holes, that the water isn't contaminated, supposedly, that they could still drink it and they don't notice any kind of difference. I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't want to drink any water that has garbage and TV tubes busted in it. I don't know.
No, not really. I don't think that's
impossible demons.
Water.
Yeah, and then demons that we'll get to later. Here's one theory. People were saying that supposedly as you go, we were taught in school, as you go towards the center of the earth, it gets hotter.
Yeah.
Like, could the trash just be disintegrating the deeper it gets before it even gets to the bottom?
That's in fact a possibility. If the hole does go that deep, the temperatures at the depths of the Earth's crust, when it starts to hit magma and that kind of thing, will disintegrate anything that goes down there, really.
Yeah. Well, supposedly, I'm trying to see how deep is the Earth's crust? Like, how thick is it? About 25 miles is what Google says. So I guess then you get to the mantle, it supposedly starts getting to like molten, right?
Yeah,
really
molten. And
so they said that this supposedly is 15 miles down. He hasn't touched the bottom. So that's what, roughly about 10 or 15 miles away from what Google says would start heating up.
So yeah, it gets to the mantle.
Supposedly they did send a guy down the hole though, and we will get into that too. So I don't know how they found this volunteer, but you got to be a lunatic to want to be lowered down this hole on a rope.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So
yeah, definitely.
Some more strange things about the hole. Mel says one time he tried bringing an AM FM radio near the hole, and the radio turned just into static. He says that he was bringing a group of people out to the hole, and they started hearing old-time music come on this radio. And he says a baseball game was playing on a different station, but the baseball game that he's talking about had apparently happened 30 years prior. How he knows it was 30 years ago, I don't know, unless they mention the year on this recording. So the two questions that I asked, Nick, could this be a gateway to a parallel universe or another dimension if they're hearing So if they're supposedly here, they're hearing this baseball game from 30 years ago, or they're hearing music that sounds like it's like 50 years old. What's your take on this?
I mean, that's definitely a possibility. There are different points on the planet that people speculate could be gateways to hell or some other kind of dimension. We have one
Right.
here in Nevada with Goldfield. So could this the whole Mel's Hole be some kind of a subterranean trans-dimensional gateway?
Maybe.
I'm open to the possibility.
Well, Iron Wolf also asked that. He was asking, could it be an interdimensional gateway of some kind? What do you think, Tim? Like, whether you believe in the idea that it actually was bringing up this baseball game from at that point in time would have been the 1950s at that point.
Yeah, well, like I said, anything if it is an dimensional portal, I guess anything's possible.
I would want to be
like
if I was the one
that's
being
what it is.
Well, if I was one being lowered down the hole, I'd have that radio blasting 1970s rock music or something that'd be lowered. Iron Wolf Nick, he says it should be as safe as sending a pack of lifesavers down to lower a person down there. And look, this is what I said. I said, if lifesavers can make the trip, we can try and lure Nick to go down.
Yeah, just so you can drop me in the hole, right?
So, getting back on track. So animals won't go near this hole, supposedly. Mel was saying that all the local dogs won't go anywhere near the hole. They get scared and they run, or they start barking like crazy when they go near this hole. Birds won't go near the hole. I guess wild birds, they'll just fly around it. For some reason, animals do not like this hole. I know sometimes they say certain dogs could sense earthquakes, or different types of animals could see. You think it's something like that?
Yeah, I mean, animals do have an increased perception of the paranormal and things like ghosts, and they can detect earthquakes before they happen. So animals definitely have an increased ESP, I guess you could call it. So if this thing is an interdimensional portal, animals would be scared to go next to it.
True.
What do you think, Tim? You think the animals
Yeah,
know?
no, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Like Nick said, yeah, animals have bigger perception. Most animals have a bigger perception of that kind of stuff than we do. So
Yeah.
if they don't sense anything good, yeah, probably not go over there near it.
Well, Mel was saying too that this hole, they don't know exactly how old this hole is. I don't know if this plays a role into this. Supposedly, Mel was saying there's a retaining wall on the top, like a small wall to keep someone from falling in. He says one of his elderly neighbors said that at one point they remember seeing a series of stone columns that were at the around the hole, like there was some kind of ancient. I don't know if you call it. I guess it would be some kind of ancient civilization was doing something with the hole. Who would have done that? Like, does any of you know of any kind of ancient civilizations that would have been around in that part of the world? That
they would have
had
to have been one of the Native American communities. I'm not aware of any civilizations up in the Northwest like that.
Well, Mel was saying that he didn't know that if this was some kind of sacred site to some kind of natives from the area, like in ancient times. He did say though that someone had put work into the hole, because they built these stone columns there they're not there nowadays, I guess. But he was saying that the first 15 feet or so of the hole, it looked like it was made out of stone or stone bricks. Like someone had taken time to brick up the top of the hole to make it look nice, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like it was a well at some point. And he says that then it turns into miscellaneous rocks and soil once you get like a certain depth. My question too is, so what were they trying to do? Were they trying to decorate the hole to make it for sacrifices, or to? They could have just made the hole to throw garbage down. I mean, if they're putting stone columns around it, right?
Yeah, it would definitely have some kind of significance for an indigenous.
Yeah.
If all these paranormal happenings are true around this hole, then an ancient culture would view it as a place where the gods or spirits can be communed with, or something like that.
Yeah. Or maybe they thought they were building the wall to keep something in there, maybe.
Oh, that's true too. There might have been a lid on this at some point because he said there's a retaining wall. So someone was trying to keep people from either going in or something from coming out. Iron Wolf was saying something like this would have been ancient non-terrestrial technology. True. Continuing on, I was talking about how animals wouldn't go towards this hole. Supposedly, the neighbors around Mel were talking about, from Ellensburg, I'm guessing, they were talking about how what would happen if they sent a person down the hole, or what would happen if something living went down this hole. Well, supposedly they did this. Someone's dog had died. This was a dead dog, not a living dog. And they decided to throw the dog's carcass down the hole. He says they threw this dog down the hole. Mel was very scared when he was talking about this. And he says the next day or a couple days later, they saw the dog. It was a hunting dog with very distinctive marks. He said that the dog was alive again. And it was running around in an area that the hunter had gone hunting in. And supposedly it was wearing the same kind of collar. So there's no mistaking that this was the same dog. And the dog looked as if it was hunting with someone else, is what the collar was saying. And the dog wouldn't come when they were calling it. Like, it didn't even recognize that someone was there calling it, or it didn't recognize them. Almost as if it was another dimension, or it was.
I was just going to say, maybe different dimensional. Yeah, I remember that story too.
Yeah, so what I thought was interesting on there is I didn't know that. I don't know if Nick heard that either. Mel was saying that the dog wouldn't come when it was called, almost as if it didn't even know that there was someone standing there calling it, or it just had no memory of that person ever existing.
It sounds like the movie, the novel and the movie Pet Sematary.
It does. It does.
You bury your animal in that Indian burial ground, and it comes
completely different.
Well, what do you think, Nick? Would you think that if the dog story happened, the dog had memory of going hunting in a specific area, why wasn't it coming when it was called? Did it not even know the person was there? Was it a ghost? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, it might be like a ghost. They're living on a different terrain.
But the interesting thing is they never said what ended up happening to the dog. They don't know if it just ran off and they never saw it again. Did they chase after it? The Mel never said.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I guess if the dog comes back to life, is just resurrected from the dead, then maybe it doesn't have all of its prior memory. It could have a fragmented psyche. I mean, that really, really delves deep into like metaphysical philosophy.
Yeah, it does. Like I said, or it's just living on a different plane of dimension, and it doesn't even realize we're like a lot of ghosts.
Well, so here's my next question. Mel was talking to Art at one point. Mel said if he knew he had a life-threatening disease where he was going to die, he said he would jump down the hole and see what happened to him. Can you imagine that? He said he would jump down there, and he said it is in his will, and when he dies, he wants to be disposed of in that hole.
Awesome.
I don't know if he wants to come back to life or what the deal is, but can you imagine, Nick, if I died, you threw me down the hole, and then the next day you see me wandering around, but yet I'm not coming when you're calling me, and I act like I don't know you even exist. How scary that would be.
Yeah, that'd be pretty scary.
Yeah, seriously.
Or even if you didn't know the person, you see someone walking around all confused outside this hole, and you'd be like, "Who's that?" And it's like, "Oh, that's Billy. We threw him down the hole the other
Threw
day."
him down the hole after he died.
That would scare the crap out of
Yeah.
me. Well, not to mention Mel supposedly lives close to this hole. So what's to say this? If you throw a person down the hole, they're not going to come knocking on your door or something.
Yeah.
I just love how we go from like, let's throw garbage and let's throw animal carcasses in there. And then
it's like, now let's throw people. What Mel was saying.
Yeah, and then we'll get onto that too.
Oh, yeah. So Mel was saying, this is kind of interesting. He was saying that plants that are native to the area grow very well around the edges of the hole. I guess there's not very much vegetation and things that grow in this area, but I guess supposedly if you put like some kind of plants or shrubs or whatever, I've never been to that part of Washington, so I don't know what grows up there, but
lots of pine forest.
Yeah. Iron Wolf wants to piggyback a little bit on what we were talking about. He says, could that be an alternate universe? Talking about the dog, could it be like a double?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was my theory.
He was saying it might not have been the same dog from this dimension or reality. Maybe it's something all different altogether that we just don't understand, is what he's saying.
Yeah, that's true. Could be
Continuing
like
on.
a dog.
Yeah.
Woof
So
woof. A woof woof.
Yeah. Well, Mel was saying that lots of Native Americans lived on the land in the past. So maybe they had these stone pillars there because they had tossed dead bodies down there or some kind of offerings or sacrifices in the past.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Here's another question, Nick. This one's just kind of silly, but I thought I'd ask it anyways. Someone called into Art Bell's show at one point saying, what if there was a subterranean creature down there living and eating all the garbage and things that the locals throw down the hole?
Again,
that's a long stretch.
Yeah,
goes into the bazaar and
quite imaginative, very creative.
Yeah.
I just love that. Like, I don't know where we find evidence to have even support that, even if it was real.
But I'm not even making it up. Someone really did.
No, I believe it. No, that's the thing. I'm like, we've been studying the paranormal long enough. We know the kind of stuff that comes out.
Well, and he was saying, and then the guy goes, he volunteered to go down into the hole. He said he didn't want to see like what was at the bottom of the hole or anything. He wanted to go down there to see what kind of creature was eating the garbage, and he was serious. It was a grown man, and this was in 1997. There was a man. He didn't want to be lowered down the hole to see what was down there, to see why the dog came back to life or anything. He wanted to be lowered down in a cage with a high-powered flashlight to look at the monster that was eating the garbage. I was like, it doesn't get any better than that on the psycho scale, right?
In a cage.
Yeah, he wanted to be lowered down in a cage, he said. So, the next thing I was going to say, Nick, this is something that I know we're going to be asked at some point. How do you detect how deep the hole is? And I wrote down some questions. I was going to have you and Tim say your thoughts before I start asking you and Tim questions.
Okay.
Basically, you just do what Mel already did, just drop a weighted fishing line and get down there and see how long it takes before you finally get it.
Or a parachute and just jump.
Well, he does the old school fishing line theory. He says he uses 20-pound fishing line, and he puts down 5,000 feet of it every, I don't know how often, but I'm guessing once a week, once a month, something like that. Here's the problem, though. If he's put 80,000 feet of 20-pound fishing line down this hole, what's to say that this thing doesn't just snap? Because wouldn't it weigh more than 20 pounds eventually?
True.
Yeah, it would probably at some point for a variety of factors.
And that was one of the main things that people claim that the story's not believable, because I guess they're saying they're putting tons of this weighted line down there, and I guess he says it hasn't broken or anything yet.
Just sorry, not to change the subject, but yeah, Twitter is blowing up right now with all of our stuff. I just read a bunch of stuff on there. People are advertising it for us.
Cool. Thank you, everybody out there.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So if you're trying to
including Iron Wolf just now.
What's up?
Including Iron Wolf a few minutes ago. Thank you.
Oh yeah, Iron Wolf. I see you have questions in there. We'll get to those in just a moment. So here's some of the common questions. Could you use a sonar or a radar to see how deep that is? You want to answer that one, Nick?
Yeah. I mean, assuming it's just a regular hole, yes, sonar or some kind of radar could give you an idea of how deep the hole could be. But if it is indeed a transdimensional gateway, then the sonar waves might not really do good, because that gets into subatomic particles and energy. It might not do a good job if it's an interdimensional gateway.
But since it's sonar and it uses sound waves, would that possibly just bounce off the edges of the hole, though?
Right, and you would never ever reach the end to see how deep it is. So.
You would eventually get so far down, maybe it would just bounce off.
Lose signal.
Yeah, you lose the signal. Yeah.
The next thing I see online is, what about a laser? Could you use a laser? I don't know how lasers, how that works as far as determining depth, but
Again, a laser would shoot down the hole, but if it is as deep as it's purported to be, eventually you're going to lose sight of the laser with the naked eye. So it's only going to go as far down as you can see. And I don't know what that range would be, but it's not going to be the bottom of the hole if it's indeed as deep as it's reported to be.
so you would do the old fishing line, right, Nick? If it was you do the old fishing line technique.
Yeah.
Hey, Cambria said they found us.
Hello, Cambria.
Hey, so something I thought was weird on here. So the next thing that I wrote down is, why don't they send a person down this hole? See what happens. They did.
Funny you should
They
ask.
did find someone to go down the hole.
Yeah.
And we'll get into after we get over these general questions, we'll talk about what happened to the guy that they lowered down the hole. So how deep, if this hole really goes down 80,000 feet, like Mel was saying, is there even air down the hole? And once you get to a certain point, are you just going to suffocate? Is there enough air down there?
Or like in the ocean, has the pressure work? You know what I mean? Like the pressure.
Yeah. Is there dangerous gases down there? Like, would you die eventually?
Yeah, most likely.
If this might be like the Hollow Earth theory says, if you go down the hole, are you just going to fall into some cavern that looks like some other
dimension
world?
like we were possibly throwing around?
Well, or if it gets hotter and hotter, the farther down you get, like we were told in school, the closer to the Earth's core, if you think that it's molten down there, would you just burn up? Well, so on one of the Art Bell shows, Mel did say they found a volunteer. They found a man from Washington State that volunteered to go down the hole. I believe it was year 2000. He went down the hole, and he was lowered down to about 1,400 to 1,600 feet. And they said suddenly the line started bouncing around wildly. And he was saying that it was, I guess they had some kind of a signal to raise him up if there's an emergency. And they started cranking him up. I don't exactly know how long this would take to crank someone up 1,400 feet. My guess is quite a long time. But so they cranked this guy up. They said when he got to the top, this guy was a wreck. They said that he was screaming. He was hysterical. He was saying that his clothes were ripped. He was saying that there was some kind of demons or there was some kind of monsters down there that were poking at him and prodding at him. And he said that he literally thought he was being lowered into the caverns of hell. He said that there was like some kind of mob. That's the only way I could word it. Some kind of beasts of some kind or ghostly figures. And I guess he said it started getting extremely hot and there were some kind of monsters showed up. What do you guys think of that? I know that sounds insane saying
Oh,
that.
it
Like,
does. I remember hearing that. I remember listening to that Art Bell episode way back in the day. I remember that. And the guy,
I feel like I sound insane mentioning that, but I guess supposedly, according to the caller, that happened.
I mean,
You
sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Two ways you could say that he did go down into the hole and there were these creatures down there, whether they be subterranean reptoids, demons from another dimension, we don't know, but maybe there are creatures down there in the bottom of the hole, or maybe he started hallucinating due to pressure changes in gases and oxygen levels.
Very possible.
So he could have had basically a psychedelic trip going down into this hole where he saw these things and his mind was just playing tricks on him.
True.
So,
Like you said, if we're talking about the interdimensional things, it could be something even from a different universe we can't even comprehend our knowledge about, you know.
but taking the theory on, just say the theory's real. If this really was a pit to hell, or it led to somewhere like hell, just saying, or if there's, even if it doesn't lead to hell, there's these monsters or these figures are down there that are scary and doing whatever. Could that explain why there was this retaining wall and why there's these columns at the top of the Mel's hole? Could this have been some kind of a religious site?
Could be.
So continuing on, So Mel called into Art Bell's show and he had this long talk in 1997. I guess Mel was supposed to make a second appearance on the show, but he ended up flaking out, and he didn't come back on the show. Well, Art Bell had reached out to Mel, and he says we finally gets a hold of Mel, and he says the government allegedly took over the property after his first appearance on the show. So he was saying that supposedly he came home one day and there was a government man. There was a government man, and he was saying that a plane had crashed on the land, that he couldn't come back until that was handled, like it was picked up and everything, the investigation was over. The man told Mel that it would be easy for them to find a drug lab on the property or something illegal when Mel was demanding to go onto his property. And the government allegedly eventually offered Mel a lease. They wanted to lease him $3 million per year or $250,000 a month to use this hole. But supposedly, according to Mel, he had to relocate out of the country. Have you heard this?
Australia, I think.
Yeah, he ended up taking
it's
the deal and went to Australia. Real quick, Iron Wolf had another comment. He was saying, I wouldn't call them demons, since a demon is a word stolen from the Greeks. Let's see. Daemon meaning a spirit of influence, good or bad. Yeah, I didn't know that.
We just call them demons. That's how most people know them. That's the only reason we say that.
Yeah, so Mel ends up taking the government up on their offer, he says, for $250,000 a month or $3 million a year. And he moves to Australia and he opens a wombat conservation center of some kind. And I guess this wombat rescue place he had was doing pretty well. And Mel had no intentions to come back to the U.S. for a while there. And he says he finally gets a notice saying that eventually the government quit paying him, and they were saying that the land belonged to them, like they stole the land from him. I don't have any way to prove that this happened or didn't happen. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But according to Mel, sorry, Alex, I'm coming over a cold. Mel said that he used the money he was given to open this wombat rescue, and that one day the wombat rescue mysteriously closed when he was in the USA visiting his brother. And he was saying all the employees said that they got severance checks, which was unknown to Mel. And Mel, once he got over here and found out that his livelihood in Australia was gone, he said he got hit with a big-time lawsuit for illegal construction done on the site, even though he hasn't even been to the site in 3 years and his bank account was empty. He said some of the projects were building roads without permits. They were putting water lines in, some kind of pipes for water in general, he was saying. He didn't get into the specifics, but apparently, well, he was told to leave the country. He left the country, and then I guess someone screwed him over and took the land from him. Is that even possible, guys? What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, no, the government can seize your property under eminent domain.
Yep. Good old Uncle Sam.
I don't agree with the practice, but it exists.
Oh, sure you do, Nick.
Yeah. So
big time.
He says that they supposedly even got into his bank account and were telling his employees that they were closing and all this stuff.
Oh yeah, they'll weaponize the IRS against you. It's like a known fact they do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
so I believe it.
So that's kind of one of the weird, like, people were going to ask what ended up happening to the hole. The last that we were told, the hole was not in Mel's possession anymore. It belonged to the government. I do have a couple notes before we get into a little bit deeper into this. Supposedly, the area around Mel's hole was a no-fly zone in the early 2000s. I don't know how they found that out, but supposedly it was a no-fly zone. Mel was saying that one time, like I told you, when they took his money and everything, I wrote some notes on that. They said Mel was helping his nephew move from Tacoma to Olympia, and he was supposed to take some kind of like a Greyhound bus home. And while he was on the bus, I guess there was some kind of incident, and Mel was drugged, he says. He woke up about 10 or 12 days later in San Francisco, beaten badly. He said he had some of his molars were gone. He didn't know who abducted him or why. he had marks on his arm where he says an IV was placed, or there was tape to hold this IV in his arm, and his famous belt buckle that was his pride and joy was stolen from him. What do you think that has to do with it, Nick? Does that even have anything to do with this? Or because Mel talked about this for like a long time, saying someone had abducted him, and he thought it had something to do with the hole.
Well, I mean, the story definitely takes an interesting turn. I mean, he just goes from talking about a bottomless pit in his backyard, and then all of a sudden he's like a James Bond-esque figure where he's running from the government, and they've seized his bank account, and they're beating him up, taking his possessions. It's an interesting story, and
yeah, it is.
If it is true, it's plausible, definitely, that if you had the hole on your property, the government could definitely accost you and harass you and treat you in a bad manner. The government does have a history of doing that.
They won't even let you collect rainwater in your own yard, for example. Without throwing you in prison.
Well, what would the government want with the hole? I guess that's another good conversation right there. What would they want to do with this?
Well, they'd study it to utilize it possibly in war. That's what our government usually does. Yeah. Any technology they develop it to use in warfare. And if this thing is a interdimensional gateway, they could use it like a Stargate,
or see what they could gain from the surroundings and the environment and energies it may give off.
True. So one last note before we get into the second part of the claims. So a television crew went out to look for Mel's hole after his first appearance when he first went to the media, and they didn't find the hole. But what they did find was evidence of lots of military activities on this land in the general area that Mel was describing. They saw tire marks from many vehicles. They saw military boot prints. They saw that heavy machinery was driving around. And they even saw that there was fences put up in the area that weren't there before. So apparently somebody was there wanting to check this area out. And it wasn't just a couple people. Apparently it was a pretty large group of people that were there for the film crew. I personally haven't seen the footage from the film crew or the pictures, but I'm guessing that they were out on a local news station in the late 90s, early 2000s at some point. Have you seen those, Tim or Nick?
No, I haven't, but
it's been a while, but I've seen them.
So here's the next thing I was going to say. So Mel made these claims when he first went to the media, talking about how he had this bottomless pit in his backyard. Mel went on, as far as I know, he only went on the Art Bell show, but he started getting very famous from this story. And I guess once the first broadcast was over, Mel made I'm trying to think of the word for this. And he made a discovery. Supposedly that there was a second bottomless pit in northern Nevada. And his claims about the second pit start getting a little wild, like a little unbelievable. But we're going to go over them anyways. But he started getting a little bit wild. I don't know what T means. T was saying sounds. I don't know what they mean by that. Do you guys?
T?
Oh, she says they're saying sounds like Mel had some great LSD. Yeah. LSD. Well, so we're gonna hold off on my opinion, Tim's opinion, and Nick's opinion on if we believe these stories. Now we're gonna hold off till a little bit later on this. Like I said, so Mel's original story, he claims he had this pit. It had these amazing paranormal stories, these paranormal topics. It sounds a little outrageous, but it sounds like it could be believable. Well, his second hole sounds a little bit more on the edge of the unbelievable, and we're going to get into that. So Mel claims that he was contacted by a Native American tribe about a second hole in northern Nevada after he made his first claims about this hole in his backyard. I don't know if I call it his backyard, but on the land that he owned. The second hole, this was on, instead of private land, this was on federal land. And he was told that it was used by Basque shepherds as grazing land for sheep. Nick, you want to talk a little bit about who the Basques are, if you know?
Well, yeah, the Basque are people that originate from the French-Spanish border along the Pyrenees Mountain area, and a great deal of them migrated to Nevada in the early 20th century, late 19th century, and did go to northern Nevada, establishing ranches where they tended sheep and cattle.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think they have a Basque festival every year up there. I'd like to check out someday. But
well, did you tell them your relationship to the Basques, Nick?
yeah, I do have some Basque ancestry on my father's side. They come from that. My father's side comes from that part of the world. However, I don't think I'm related to any of the Basque. I live in northern Nevada, as far as I know. But
Your dad knows where the hole is, Nick?
Yeah, he does. He has top secret knowledge where the hole is. But yeah, the Basque people have a presence in northern Nevada.
Iron Wolf was saying their language can't be categorized with any other language, and they are all RH negative. I didn't know that. Did you guys?
I heard of it, but
and I have RH negative blood, so.
Oh, continuing on. So this land is federal land. It's the Native Americans said that the Basques have some modern day sheep farmers or whatever you want to call them. They raise sheep on the land. And they don't own the land, but they raise sheep there. And he said the sheep won't go towards the hole. Some of this will sound like I'm repeating myself, but this is, I kind of have to, so you guys know what's going on. So the sheep won't go near the hole, and neither will their dogs. They seem to be afraid of it. Like they know that there's something not right about this land. And before I continue on, we have an interesting from Sovereign Cosmic Wild Man. He had a comment. He says, that's interesting. He's never heard that before about Nevada and the Basque people. I never did either, to tell you the truth, until I read about this. Did you guys know that? That the Basques were around in Nevada? I didn't know that until I read this.
I heard about it a little bit on a PBS show I like to watch called Outdoor Nevada, where a guy goes around and sees all the different outdoor attractions in the state.
Mm-hmm.
So,
there was that story.
Little bit of
there
history.
was that story of that time traveler from Toward that originated from the Basque region. Yeah, I didn't know that either. We'll get into that a little bit later if you want, Nick. Because I know that you know more about that than I do, it seems like. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later, and there's some questions we were asked at the beginning of the show we're going to get into in just a moment. So this hole, the first hole sounds like it was kind of just like a hole that was important to some ancient civilization at some point. This hole, apparently, according to Mel, it has a metal collar around it. So the top of the hole is covered by almost like a big metal, like I would call it a guardrail, a metal ramp of some kind. It's like a metal collars around it.
Mm-hmm.
And he says the hole is of the same diameter as the one in Washington, roughly about 9 feet in diameter. Mel says at one point they were messing around with some tools and he dropped a wrench on top of this metal collar and it didn't echo, meaning that this hole was pretty deep. And Mel was saying that what he thought was weird was that the Basques didn't know who had put the metal collar on, but it didn't look like it was ancient. It looked like it was like somewhat modern. And he was saying that there were notches on top of this collar, like something's supposed to lock into it, or maybe it was holes for a crane to pick this up and put it down, I'm guessing.
Maybe a lid of some sort.
Yeah, I compared it to a manhole cover is what I was thinking. But yeah, and I guess supposedly the Basques and the Native Americans tried taking tools and torches and things and cutting into this metal collar, and it's pretty strong because they couldn't get into it. So what do you guys think about that? Do you think, is this something paranormal or just some pretty good steel of some kind? Whoever put that in?
Probably, maybe it serves some kind of functional purpose. If
Yeah,
like your sheep or your livestock in the area, yeah, they put like a a fence around the hole so that they don't fall in. That's what it sounds like.
Iron Wolf was talking about where I said the animals won't go near the hole. He was saying animals tend to have a more magnetite than humans, and I guess he was saying that they could detect maybe something's wrong with the magnetic fields, because we're talking about how the radios won't really work out there.
Yeah.
Supposedly the bass were saying that radiant heat comes out of this hole, and some people have even slept near the edge of the hole outside in winter, and this heat kept them warm. So this hole, unlike the other one, some kind of heat is coming out of this hole that wasn't reported with the other one. So this one might actually go deeper down into the earth than the other one, only because once you get down to the mantle, that's where it starts getting heat starts coming up.
Now, maybe just to bring up as a side note, there is a pit near Hermosa called the Devil's Hole.
Yes.
Which is the subterranean cavern where some divers went missing. So maybe the Devil's Hole is connected to the lore of the second.
And you know what? Nevada used to be underwater at one point too. It used to be part of it. So maybe there's caverns that link you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I know over by Lovelock, Nevada, northwest, and I know over by Reno, they do have a lot of caves and things up that way. And even the Great Basin has tons of caves over that way, over northeastern Nevada. I guess the Native Americans were saying that this is a spiritual site, or it was a spiritual site. At least that's what Mel was told. And the Native Americans pointed this out. They said if you look inside the hole, it's lined with metal as far down as you could see. It appears to be made by a man-made or by someone or some intelligent race of people of some. The other hole was kind of primitive, where there's bricks for about 15 feet, and once you get below the bricks, it was just dirt. This hole supposedly is lined by metal as far down as you can see. So someone at one point sent a machine down this hole to do that, right? Or some kind of workers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So what do you know? Do you guys know about tunneling or any kind of tunneling machines that would be able to do something like this?
Nick's an expert, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they do drill holes into the sides.
Yeah.
And reinforce them with metal. So.
Yep, for mining and things. I know, like bare minimum of that, unfortunately, but
yeah, me too.
Well, here's the thing, though, I
just know general augers and stuff that could raise dirt.
They said the Russians, us, the Canadians, and the Japanese were having like a race in the 80s to see who could dig the deepest hole. But the augers that were digging the holes, those holes, you'll never fall into these holes, and they weren't lined, as far as I know, they weren't lined with metal. They're only about this big, like. You're never going to fall into these holes.
Yeah, just enough for like a small tube to go down.
Yeah. They'll never go down that. They have like small caissons they send down there.
Yeah.
But you'll never fall into these holes. The Mel's holes, the ones he's talking about, these are 9 feet across. So that would have to be an auger that's at least 9 feet across to go do this. Sovereign Cosmic Wildman says, there's a reptilian researcher named John Rhodes that had the goods on reptilian tunneling tech. That's a good good lead right there. Hey, Cosmic Wildman, if you could write us in the chat, is John Rhodes still alive? Because if he is, maybe we could try to get him on the show.
Yeah, future topic again.
Yeah, because we had a guy named Bill Tracer that came on our show, and he was really in Hollow Earth theories. And that was actually pretty fascinating. We had him on 3 different times on our old show.
Yeah.
And if John Rhodes is into that kind of stuff, he'd make a good guy to have on the show.
I think so, too.
I'm not exactly sure about John Rhodes' research, so that's what I was asking. The Basques haven't tried to see how deep the second hole is. They were saying that this is what I thought was bizarre. They said that sometimes, occasionally, you see black beams of light shooting out of this hole and going into the sky. They said even if you go at nighttime, you could sometimes see black beam of some kind going into the sky. So what's your take on that?
Maybe a portal again.
What could that, besides that, I'm at a loss of words. What could that even be?
Yeah, really.
I don't know.
Besides something not good, whatever it is, right? Tim?
Sorry, what's that?
I said, Whatever that is, it doesn't sound good, whatever it is.
No, not at all.
And Mel was saying that occasionally the hole that he's talked about in Washington, they would sometimes see a black beam coming out of it as well. But he didn't talk about that on his initial interview. This one of the later ones. So the Basques were saying there's no noise comes out of the hole. You can't hear any echo. There's no sound like coming from the bottom of the hole coming up. This is kind of bizarre. They were trying to do a test to see if there's any kind of bizarre properties of the hole. The Basques lowered ice in a bucket down to 1,500 feet using a winch. Allegedly, they wanted to see if the ice would melt, or they're going to see what was going to happen, to see what the see what the conditions were like down the hole. The ice was lowered into the hole and it didn't melt. The hole was radiating heat, but it didn't melt the ice. Mel says that the ice wasn't cold to the touch when they brought it back up, but it looked just like the ice that they lowered down. But they had a control sample on the surface that was all melted. And he says when they placed this ice into a fire, the ice caught fire like it was like charcoal or wood or like a something that would catch fire. He says they tried the ice experiment multiple times, and sometimes the strange ice material would be duplicated, and sometimes it would melt. So it wasn't all of the time.
Very weird.
What do you guys think of that? So then it starts going into the bizarre and the really bizarre after this. So this is a good stopping point to hear your opinion before we get into the really bizarre stuff.
Well, it's kind of like this thought experiment that I've heard about called the Schrodinger's cat.
Yep.
And basically, the gist of it is you take a dead cat and put it in a box, and you really don't know if the cat's dead or alive because of alternating, fluctuating quantum timelines or something like that. So this could be like a Schrodinger's hole where things come back to life, or one being is exchanged for another being that's doppelganger, or the laws of physics as we understand it do not apply to wherever this hole goes, as evidenced by the ice not melting.
That's a good idea. I never thought of that. Do you know about that theory, Tim?
I've heard of it, but I'm not super familiar with it.
We have a couple of things in the chat real quick before I get a little sidetracked. I wanted to show their comments. Cosmic Wildman says, if we could get John Rhodes is still around, and if we could get a hold of him, there's a good chance he could come on the show. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
And then we have Alex from the 6. He says, sounds like condensed ice. So this is where it kind of gets into.
Sorry, not to change the subject, but Iron Wolf also wrote us the John Rhodes Twitter account here too. So
yeah, I was gonna say I'm not sure what his research is. I'm gonna go look him up when we're done with this though. So now we're gonna kind of get into the bizarre, and this is where Mel's story kind of starts to sound a little odd. So Mel says one man who was there placed some of this ice into his wood stove in his house, and it acted like a fuel, and it didn't melt or dissolve. The ice burned allegedly for several months, and when the man came home from work one day, the stove had collapsed through the floor of the cabin. I guess they repaired the cabin, but kept the wood stove, I guess, on the ground outside of the cabin. But they built I guess they repaired a hole around it or something. He says he continued living into the cabin until he moved out with his brother. And at the time when he moved out, the stove was supposedly 5 feet underground and was forming a smooth hole and was digging itself underground. What do you guys think of that? Is that nonsense? Do you think that's something that might have happened? What's your opinion on that? The look on Nick's face.
Yeah, I know. I'm dumbfounded too. I'm like, I don't know.
All right.
So would this have this thing just continuously dig itself underground, or
that's what it sounds like? Maybe that's what created the hole. Maybe.
So they're saying that, I don't know for sure, but is Mel trying to say that if you take something out of the hole that will naturally dig its own hole, or it wants to come back to the hole somehow?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a really interesting story that it gets wilder and wilder the longer it goes.
Yeah. Well, this is the kind of the wildest part of the story I'm going to say here right now. So there was a Basque man who said he wanted to be lowered down into the hole. So they didn't lower this guy down into the hole because I guess the conversation they were having, they were saying if ice is made of water and it came out with those weird properties, if you lowered a man down there, and men are obviously made of water, large parts of their bodies, what would happen to them? You know, would you turn into like some weird block of whatever? Like, would you
come out looking like Han Solo in Star Wars?
Yeah. So the story goes that the bass put a sheep into a cage. They lowered it down 1,500 feet. And I don't know how they chose 1,500 feet again. That's the same distance they lowered the man in the other hole. But the sheep came out dead. I guess they said it took about 30 minutes. They left it down there. It came out dead. They said that they decided to kind of cut it open and do an autopsy. And they said the sheep looked like it had been cooked on the inside. The organs looked like they turned into some kind of a gel. But this is where it gets really bizarre. And whether this might sound really unbelievable to some people. But I guess the insides of the sheep turned into a gel. And in their place was something that looked like a giant moving tumor. He says that the Basques took this tumor. Sorry, I kicked my table here. They took the tumor out and they put it onto a table. They cut into this tumor and something came out that they said looked like a fetus of a seal, but it had human eyes, I guess is the way this was described. They said it looked like a seal with flippers. It was about 18 inches long. It had human eyes. He says the creature eventually was placed on the ground and it jumped back into the hole. But they said that it nodded at Mel and before it jumped in the hole. And Mel kept talking about how it had a strange odor to it. So my very first question, it sounds a little ridiculous. Could this have even happened? I guess would be the first question for you guys.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I got a picture of an artist's rendition of the seal fetus.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Weird.
Seems legit.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? Do you think that even happened, or is this a possibility? Or
I mean,
I don't really know what to think. It sounds a little.
I don't know either.
It sounds a little too good to be true, too bizarre to be true.
Yeah.
But if you're going to make claims like that and sound completely insane, would you really say something like that, knowing what people are going to think?
Unless Mel's just trying to get a following or keep the story going.
Yeah, it just gets
more and more bizarre.
It went from X-Files to James Bond, and now it sounds like The Thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, then the story gets even more outrageous. I only have a couple more bullet points here, and then we're going to get into some discussions about different things relating to this. The Basques claim that the seal had come back later on. This, I guess, like over the next couple of years. And they said that it communicated with them over a radio, using a series of clicks and beeps. And they were saying shortly after that happened, a bunch of bright colored birds now circle the hole, and they come out to visit the hole, I guess. In northern Nevada,
even know what to say.
In northern Nevada, there's tropical birds, I'm guessing, is what he's referring to.
Wow.
Can you picture that outside of Ely, Nick?
Probably not.
Yeah, I'd be a little freaked out if I saw that.
Can you imagine if Steve took us out to an endless pit and there's parrots and stuff circling it, and a seal creature that nodding at us and talking with beeps and clicks? So Mel was saying that he had a cancer diagnosis prior to visiting the second hole. He went back to see the doctors later on to see how his cancer was doing, and the cancer was supposedly gone. He thinks it had something to do with handling that seal, and the seal had taken away the sickness somehow. That I don't know. I don't know anything about that, but that to me is a little out there. Could
Yeah.
Lucille have taken his sickness away? I mean, we don't really know. So now we're going to get into, I have another section where I talk about things that point to this might be a hoax or might not be a hoax. And then I have a couple more questions after that I was asked by different people. Local news reporters found no proof of anyone named Mel Waters ever residing or owning a property in that part of Washington. That's the first bullet point I have on why it, like I said, we're gonna go over why he might not be telling the truth, and we're gonna go over why he might be telling the truth. Have you read about that, Nick? What I just said?
Yeah, there was no documented evidence of Mel Waters owning land there or even really.
Yeah. Maybe an alias, though. Who knows?
Yeah.
That's what my guess is. It could be an alias. A State Department of Natural Resources geologist in Washington State named Jack Powell. I guess he kind of went on a crusade to talk crap about Mel Waters for some reason. He said he thinks that the hole doesn't exist, and he, in his opinion, he thinks it would be impossible to exist in real life. And he said why. He says a hole of that depth, he claimed, would collapse in on itself under the tremendous pressure and heat from the surrounding areas. And he says that he thinks Mel's hole is just a deep mine shaft. Mel claimed that in his first phone call with the Art Bell show that the area around Mel's hole was blacked out on satellite maps. And he says that the hole was located on that black splotch on the map. Well, nowadays, I'm guessing that area isn't blacked out. And this man, he was on such a vendetta to talk shit about Mel Waters, he actually went to this black spot on the map. I guess he said he found 2 collapsed buildings like Mel had described in his early appearances on the Art Bell show, and he found a blocked off mine shaft or a well. And he says it looked like nothing strange. So I do have a YouTube video where the guy shows pictures of what he found. I just got to pull that up here. All right, let's see. All right, so I'm going to show my screen here for a minute, and we're going to show what this Jack Powell guy claims he found, and then we'll get into a little bit of discussion. Share my screen here. Let's see. Unmute.
Had taken over the property, they would have covered up the hole. People have been searching for it for years. And of the many locations I found, there was one that was really compelling. This is the Google map. Someone actually went to the location to see what was there. These are the pictures. During one of his phone calls, Mel said there were 2 old buildings on the property, and one of them eventually collapsed under snow. This fits the description pretty well. And also on the property is this. Yep, a hole about 9 feet wide with a stone retaining wall, exactly how Mel described. Now this caused quite a stir online, but the hole turned out to be an old well and definitely had a bottom. If you search the internet, you'll find a lot of people claiming they found Mel's hole. They haven't. It's never been found. At least, not yet. As for Mel, he's a complicated character.
So I wanted to make it proof. I wanted to play that end clip where he said a bunch of people claim they found Mel's hole, but there's no proof that anyone has actually found it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to show. So what do you guys think of that?
It's interesting to actually put pictures to it, though.
Yeah, that Jack Powell guy went on like a crusade to talk shit about Mel, I guess. Iron Wolf was saying it's easy for the government to basically erase a person's identity or their history. Also bring out witnesses to discredit someone. I agree.
Yeah.
So,
no, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not saying whether Mel is real or he's not real. We're just going over a little bit of things to say like it could go on either side of the fence. Something that's highly critical of Mel, which I could see why he would or wouldn't do this, people asked him, why is there no pictures of the actual hole? Mel would say that he forgot to take the photos. He would say cameras wouldn't work around the hole. He would say that he didn't want people to know what this hole was in his backyard or to track it down. So what do you guys think? I could see it going either way, to tell you the truth. I could see why you wouldn't want people on a national, or actually worldwide radio station be coming to your house and all that. Because we saw what happened.
I get in that sense, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I know you see what happens with Roswell crash site. You see what happens to these different historic sites, or when these airplanes crashes, like TWA and all that, people all go out to the site once they know where it's at. Or even like haunted locations are another one, or Bigfoot sighting locations.
Yeah, tourists flock to the area, to those spots, and
come see the hole, everybody! Come on!
Well, here's another thing, though. Like, you got to think about it this way. Something that goes out in Mel's favor, though. Mel never made any money off this story. He never sold Mel's whole T-shirts. He never made bumper stickers. He was just he never made any money off of it. So I don't really know what would be the purpose. Is for fame?
See, that part is true.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's no Mel's whole website. No one even knows the guy's real name.
Yeah, that's
Iron
great.
Sounds sketchy. He's doing all this research but with no photos. No, I agree. That's weird too.
Oh, yeah.
And if he's just not taking, they're saying, I believe mostly anything nowadays. Our reality is wilder than we could probably imagine.
Incredibly true.
It's true. It could go either way. I think there's more proof, and the story makes more sense for the Mel's hole in Washington to exist than the one in Nevada, though.
Yeah.
Don't you guys admit?
Yeah.
The tropical birds flying are a little much for me. So,
yeah,
it's quite a bit.
A few more questions here. Do you guys personally think there's no right or wrong answer to this? Do you think Mel Waters was a hoaxer?
I'm more inclined to think that he was a hoaxer, or maybe someone with a creative, artistic personality, and he just wanted to create his own legend and leave a mark on history, and he did. If that's what he wanted to do, he did it.
Very true. Well, he definitely created an urban legend that we're still talking about it today.
Yeah.
Well, they said it might be like one of the most popular modern day myths or legends from like the last 20, 30 years is what people say online.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Mm-hmm. See, the only problem, like Iron Wolf said, without photos or anything, you got those other pictures you just saw, which leads to more of like the hoax theory. But like, at least with the Russians, when they dug that hole, they actually put like sound. Remember, they actually put recorders in the hole and stuff. So that way, like, we have evidence of that.
Well, I try not to laugh because I know, I try not to laugh, but Iron Wolf did say something pretty funny. Look what he said. He said, people just want attention, right? Then he wrote, at least people have photos of Bigfoot.
That is true.
So, like I said, I try not to discredit the guy. I try not to say whether he's real or not, because it could go either way. But the guy disappeared around, I'd say 2005, 2006. He kind of just fell off the face of the earth. This goes in his favor. Some people claim to have actually seen the original hole other than Mel. In 2012, there's a Native American man named Gerald Osborne, and he told reporters in 2012 on TV that he had visited the hole many times since 1961. And in 2002, Osborne, I guess, led an expedition to the hole, but they couldn't find the hole. So I don't know if that's good or bad for Mr. Osborne, but I guess they couldn't find the hole. Did Mel ever even exist? That's my next question. Was this just a persona he made up? Was everything true? He just had a fake name? What do you guys think?
I think it was somebody, like Iron Wolf said, that just wanted some attention, and they created this character, Mel Waters, and the a really long, elaborate, great story. They
Mhm.
should make a movie out of it if they haven't done it yet. But
Yeah.
I think the guy just wanted a taste of fame, and he created this character in this story to get it, and he's gotten it. He's sitting somewhere probably watching podcasts like ours going,
Yeah.
I'm the one that did that. So
Or keeping it going.
yeah.
So LH Cambria, they were saying, I've heard some wild stories from military witnesses about animals being used for hybridization. Military Army intel analyst Abbott did an interview saying this among some other things. And we have Cosmic Wildman says, I do believe a lot of what is called woo. I wouldn't discount that many holes, including caves, do change. Some get covered up like the cave incident. That's true. Did you want to talk a little bit about that, Nick? About what Cosmic Wildman and what Cambria were saying?
Well, we talked about the M Cave a little while back, and Kenny Veach and a hiker, basically, in short, that found this weird cave and he disappeared while trying to go find it again. There is a guy on YouTube I saw that claimed to have found the M Cave somewhere about an hour northeast of Las Vegas, and they claimed that the cave had been sealed in with like cement or something, and it did look weird. I wish I had the video pulled up right now, but it does show an area where the rocks are slightly different from the rock in the mountainside. So
something I was looking at, Nick. So Tim was saying the Hat Man. We had a message earlier on Twitter. You want to talk to Nick about that, Tim? Because I haven't seen it myself, but can you and Nick talk about that?
Yeah.
Because we have a viewer that's watching that was wanting to.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, let me go back here. Wasn't prepared. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
Actually, Ellie Cambria, I believe it was there.
Oh, yeah.
She said her friend is having encounters with the Hat Man. Ken, do you think we would be able to help? I know Nick is actually, I do believe in the Hat Man. I know it's like the spirit that people see in their house or a possible demon. I know Nick has been witness to it. He's told us many times his story. So maybe you could elaborate, Nick, only because I've never seen the Hat Man before.
So basically, when I was a kid and I first started having paranormal encounters, I saw my first apparition, which was an old man wearing a red vest standing at the foot of my bed looking out the window. And on that night, I also remembered seeing the outline of a tall, shadowy figure wearing like one of those old 1930s gangsters hats. You could just see the outline of it in the dark. And you would not see any other details, at least from what I saw. But apparently, tens of thousands of people have seen this specter across the globe, going back to like primeval times. Now, as far as getting rid of it or whatnot, that I'm not sure, because it just appeared at my residence as a child, and I just kind of ignored it and it went away after a while. It's supposed to be an omen for something bad that might happen in your life, or it's supposed to like feed off your fear.
Mm-hmm.
We really don't know.
You want to read that, Nick, and comment on that?
We barely have a grasp on what this planet is, including the oceans, let alone anything beyond the physical dimension that we can categorize and explain. Oh, for sure. We really don't have a good idea about the world we live in, never mind expounding off into metaphysical realities.
Oh, yes. So we have a few minutes left in the show. This would be a good point to mention. You want to talk a little bit, Nick, rehash a little bit of the team news, like our personal news about us. And then we'll talk a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about next week's show.
Well, yeah, we're just continuing to go on with Bigfoots Pad Live, and we're going to try to get some more exciting interviews here. And next week,
do some ghost hunts and stuff. We tried, but we didn't work out this week.
Yeah, we're going to try to get back out in the field and do some investigations. It's been a while, but no problem, Miss Cambria. Yeah,
my best suggestion would, like you said, I read that you said you told your friend to burn sage. If it's spiritual, I would definitely burn sage. Recite as many prayers as you can. Try to draw it away from your house, the negative, your friend's house, the negative energy.
So, Nick, you want to talk a little bit about the moving of the old radio show over to this platform, the archives?
Yeah, so Jeremy's been in the process of uploading our old Blog Talk radio show onto a separate YouTube account that he had to create for logistical purposes, excuse me. And he's got about 10 to 15 of them uploaded right now. And
I'm actually 32 right now, yeah.
30? Oh. But yeah, we've done multiple interviews with Stanton Friedman, Frank Ficino, Jeff Wamsley, Jesse Marshall. I mean, we've talked to...
We had the privilege at the time of talking to these people.
To paranormal, like, legends. We were just...
So... that'll probably take about a month and a half. I'm getting about 10 done a day or so. I think I have like 100 and something to do. Next week at 7:00 p.m. Pacific on Saturday, April 29th, we have something very great planned for you guys. We're going to have author Paul Blake Smith in the house. He is going to be joining us to talk about the Cape Girardeau 1941 UFO incident. As far as I know, Paul hasn't really done a whole lot of interviews talking about that incident. He's a local that lives in Cape Girardeau, and he's interviewed tons of witnesses that were somehow part of this whole ordeal. I don't want to give too much away. I want him to tell the story next week, but that's going to be probably one of the most interesting shows we've ever done. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it sounds very cool.
You want to give out some of our links, Nick, before we end the show?
Yeah, you can find us on bigfootspad.com has been our website forever. Twitter.com/BFP team, Facebook.com/BFP team. I'm trying to get the Instagram started again, so we'll be up on pretty much every major social media platform. So check us out, subscribe to us on YouTube, share us. All support's appreciated, and we hope to really just get the message and truth about the paranormal out there to the worldwide community.
And Tim, don't forget to check the Twitter. Iron Wolf says he's going to message us about something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just saw it just now. Thank you. I'll send it to the guys.
Everybody, like I said, thanks for tuning in. We will see you all next week. We will be here Saturday, April 29th at 7 p.m. Pacific. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
And Nick's going to be lowered down in the Mel's hole later this evening.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you.